All right, so go back to avoiding the aggravations of the home inspection. All right, so if you don't know me, I am Bobby Hamilton. I am the owner of Bloodhound Home Inspection since 2006. Also own Bloodhound Environmental. That's our radon mitigation division, where we actually put radon mitigation systems in as well. Like I said, I've been inspecting since 2006. As far as the home inspector licensing, that didn't come in effect until like 2019. It was like right before COVID, but they didn't start enforcing it till 21, I believe, on there. But I'm also a licensed radon mitigation tester, mitigation specialist, um, termite inspector, and an IAC2 mold inspector as well. All right, so our course objectives today. We're going to explain a little bit of some of the back end where you don't see as far as the components of what the inspection agreement looks like. These will vary a little bit depending on which company you're working with. We're just going to go over some of the aspects that are in ours, but they should have similar components across the industry as well, as directed by the state. We'll set some expectations for your buyer. So we'll actually show you some footage of some of the areas where we're going to on an inspection, show you how those look, and avoid aggravation by seeing some of the red flag components that you may come into uh, when you come into those. When we see like different things like what does a Federal Pacific panel look like, vermiculite, stuff like that. So we'll show you that as well. All right, so some common components of the pre-inspection letter or agreement. Basically, this is going to be a contract between the buyer and the inspector. It's going to basically let you know, and we'll break down some components here, and I'll show you some in here in just a second. It'll explain the scope of the inspection, what's going to be inspected. It'll tell you like what's not inspected there as well. And it does help eliminate some surprises or confusion if people actually read the contracts there as well. Our contract is probably about a page and a half, I believe, uh, when people are looking through those. But if there is some sort of questions that people have, and we've had those in the past, where they have a question on particular parts of that, we'll go over that with them. It does state the limit of liability as far as what the inspection will cover if there's an issue down the road there as well. And we'll go over that too. The one thing you want to never do is never sign this for the buyer. Now, everything was electronically done today. So everything gets sent out electronically. As soon as somebody calls into our office or books online, within like a few minutes after booking, they'll get an email that basically says, "Here's the agreement." They can read over it. They can sign it online. It comes right back to us. Um, Sometimes if they don't sign it right away, let's just say we get to the inspection uh, and the report's sent out, that's when you may see this. Uh, if they haven't signed it prior to them getting the report, then what's going to happen is it'll prompt them to review the agreement and sign it before they can actually get the report itself. Now, you would see that as well, and it'll ask you, "Are you so and so?" And don't say yes, because if you say yes and then sign it, then you sign their contract, and that could cause you some liability issues of your own down the road there. So never sign that for the buyer. Let them sign that. All right, so some common components. The inspection agreements will always reference the Ohio State Code, which is 4764.01C, to which inspection standards are regulated and what is required under the scope of the inspection. Depending on the inspector, they may exceed those standards, as they are really light requirements as far as the actual scope of what the state requires to be done. When those requirements came out, we had to add into our own contract that if we do exceed those standards, that it's done as a courtesy, basically, that we're exceeding the standards, and it's not meant to replace the state standards on there. If you do want, like I say, if you want to do see those requirements, the Ohio State Revised Code is 476401C, if you're ever bored. Outside the scope, this basically comes down to areas that are not accessible, areas that are deemed, like, say, sort of dangerous or of a health hazard to the inspector. Take the attic, for example. If the access is blocked by the occupant's belongings, the inspector does not have to take the liability of moving those items and possibly damaging items that belong to the seller. Um, uh, in those circumstances, like when I was telling you about how within minutes we send out that inspection letter or agreement, we also send a email out to the listing agent as well. And it'll come with a short video that they can pass along to their seller, basically saying uh, for the inspection, areas that need to be accessible and things like that. That cage pets and all that good stuff, or take them out of the house. But it always talks about not having areas blocked. Some people see it, some people don't. Because sometimes we'll go and all the clothes have been removed from the closet so we can access their attic hatch in their bedroom closet, and that's great. That's the best thing that can happen. A lot of times we can go out there and you can see like their entire china set is basically on the top shelf right in front of the access hole. And those are one of those things that you just can't move those things. If damages happen, then we got liability issues with it. So always remember access is going to be key in those things. So also, like, if the attic has like mold or pest issues that pose a risk to the inspector's health, the inspector is not required to inspect it. So if there is like mold, or say there's say there's a family of raccoons living up there, the inspector's not going to go up there and fight the raccoons off uh, to inspect those areas. Uh, same thing with crawl spaces. Sometimes there's snakes in them, and if you see the snakes, that could be an issue there, depending on what they are. If you have like an area that has structural damage, where the inspector could be injured, they're not required to inspect it either. In any areas where that you're going to run into those things where areas aren't accessible, it does say in those contracts that the buyer would assume all risk for the areas. And we've had to come out sometimes, like say an access is blocked. Um, we'll have uh, where the seller will then remove the stuff, especially if we're doing a radon test that is perfect. Uh, we can come back out. We don't have to charge an extra fee because we're coming back out anyway to get the radon tests, and they can have that access cleared by the time we get there and go up and check those areas there. So always keep that in mind too. This is why access is going to be critical on a home. Now remember that the agreement is just for the home inspection itself. It's not for like additional services. So you would see like in some of these outside of the scope of the inspection items in the contract, such as like sewer lines, radon, termites, mold, appliances, and so on, are not included. We put a clause in our contract that states that like some of those items may be included during this inspection, and they're for like additional fees, and it says to check with the inspector. There's been on occasion, sometimes we do have to call back and explain that the contract is just for the inspection itself, when clients are getting like additional services. And once we explain that the other services have their own separate report and they're getting items like radon and testing and stuff like that, then there's really not an issue with it. All right, so the agreement also talks about the report itself, referencing like the state code again, that it is a confidential report, and that basically we're sending out when we send our reports out, we do send a copy to the agent, the buyer's agent. Uh, Basically, with that is, like I say, it's a confidential report, and we're sending a complimentary copy of the report to their agent unless we're instructed not to. Um, Sometimes, there's a little bit of rift sometimes we've seen with agents, and they don't want a copy sent to anybody else but themselves, especially if it's just for like informational purposes too. They don't want to send it to their agent for some reason. Um, but like I say, if it's just for informational purposes, then there wouldn't be any issue with that, because they wouldn't need to see it. If you are a listing agent, do not call the inspection company and ask for a copy of the report. It is actually against the state law for us to send it to you without written authorization from the buyer. Also, if you're passing along a report from a deal that fell through to a new buyer, you do need to have authorization from that previous buyer. That can just cause up a whole can of worms. I know it does happen out there. We all know it does happen. Um, but you don't want to be held liable down the road if issues do arrive. If you pass on a report, and let's just say they say something was missed and it wasn't in the inspection report, and then they call back to the inspection company and say, hey, we're looking at this inspection report and we had some issues after we purchased the home. Well, the inspection company is going to be like, okay, we didn't do this inspection for you. We have no agreement with you. So then that's going to fall back on to the agents involved that passed that report along. So you want to be real careful with that. Um, like I say, if you get permission, you can do that. Um, Even if you do get permission from the buyer to pass along that report, always remember that there will be no, let's say, recourse or anything if anything comes up down the road, because the inspection agreement was between the original buyer and the inspection company. So let's keep that in mind. All right, so lastly, limitation of liability if a dispute does arrive. Uh, every inspection company will have a limitation of liability with a dollar amount on there. Usually it's going to be the price of the inspection fee. That's most contracts, like the organizations that are out there, like either ASHI or InterNACHI, they have like a pre-inspection letter agreement template out there. And most of the time it's going to say that if there's any dispute or issue that comes down the road, the limit of liability is the inspection fee itself. Now, personally, ours is actually 3 times the inspection fee, if an issue comes up. So if an issue comes up and let's just say the inspection fee was $400, then our limit of liability be $1,200. But we also do have an option in our contract that's listed in there. It's for like an additional fee. They can remove that limitation liability, and they do have 30 days after the day of inspection, um, to have that limitation removed on there. So I think we're probably the only company that actually does that around here, that has a limitation liability that can be removed from the contract. But that's just options that are out there. But like I say, most companies are going to limit it to the fee itself. All right, so moving along, we're going to set some expectations for the buyer. Uh, what will you see during a home inspection? What kind of tools is the inspector going to use? What are you going to see on an inspection report? And when will you see the inspection report? All right, so we're going to, what will you see during the inspection? All right, we're going to flip to some video for you out there, and hopefully this all works. I've practiced this all. You are my guinea pigs today, so hopefully this works. All right, so one of the things that we're going to be out there, and I'm going to flip through my screen, make sure everything sees the roof. Everybody sees the roof. Good. All right, so when we're doing an inspection, of course, we're going to do the outside of the house. One of the areas that we're going to go up on is the roof itself. This is a roof that I was on, and down at the bottom, you see me pointing right there. Right down there, the bottom of the shingles are actually cupped down there. They're pushed up, and water is actually sitting there. That's why it looks a little bit different in color there, because it had actually rained that day. And you can see where the shingles had cupped. Well, that water could build up, push up the shingles, and get water to come in. But as we're going through, we look at the flashings and everything around, like the plumbing boots, and things like that. We'll come over here to a chimney as well. Now this one was had some issues with it, and we're going to be looking at flashings. Of course, the brick itself on this particular house, you can see where it's cracked, damaged. They try to patch it, things like that. The uh, the flashings are the big thing that we're going to be looking at on there. You'll see where it's like step flashing, and this top part right here, the chimney, is the cement capping that goes on the top. Sometimes you'll see on the inspection report where we talk about the capping that's on the top of a chimney. This is the part that we're actually talking about. This directs the water off the side. So when you get cracks in the top of that, uh, water will actually seep into those cracks, and then as it seeps through, it goes in between the bricks, and you get what is called spalling, which has happened to a lot of this brick that you see right here, where the brick has actually popped off the or split off the front face of it, and it keeps on doing that. So you'll see all that damage up there, damage to the brick as well. Uh, I'm talking over the comments that are on here, so that's why you see my finger floating around. But the flashings are the big thing there. There should be what they call a counter flashing down there at the bottom that overlaps the white and that brown flashing that you see on there. So when that overlaps it, then water flows over top of it. So right now, the way it sits, water can actually get behind those areas. And then you'll see like on the front. No, I forgot that. Let me back up a hair here. On this top part, all right, that chimney flue that's on the left, you'll see where it doesn't have a top on it. The top is actually missing off of that because it's actually sitting down on the ground or right there at the bottom of the screen there. It's actually sitting on the roof. But anyway, moving along. Uh, Looking at the flashing, like you can see like right here how loose it is. I can actually stick my finger right behind there. So any water that's hitting that chimney is going to float behind that. And then it's going to damage whatever finish material, ceiling, insulation that's going to be in that area right behind it there. So that's just some of the areas that we look for on a chimney part. All right, so let me flip videos here. We'll flip to an attic video. All right, so in an attic, a lot of the main things that we're looking at is going to be one, the structure, two, insulation to make sure that it's fully insulated in there. Even on new builds, I've gone to a new build before where it must have been like a Friday afternoon or something. They didn't finish the insulation, and like half the attic doesn't have anything in it. So always remember the new construction needs inspections too, because sometimes they just float through. There was actually years ago that when they had like a parade of homes type deal around the area, you could go around to different houses, and there was a house that was probably, I think, like 4,000 and some square feet. And I arrived there doing an inspection 6 years later. One of the areas on the side of one of the dormers that you can't see from the ground had no siding on it. It still had like the building paper on it. Uh, so always remember, new construction needs it too. But anyway, up in the attic, as we're going through, like I say, we look at structural members. Now, where got my flashlight right there, that little silver pipe that's in the background, this is a lot of times what you're going to see on an inspection report where we say the bath fan is venting into the attic, and sometimes that will cause mold issues in there as well. So that pipe that's in there in the back there, that's from the bath fan, and it's venting straight up, and it should go to the outside, so that you don't get that heat and humidity up in the attic there. Now, as we're going through the attic, we'll swing back around, and on this side, there's another bath fan. And what that one's doing is they actually attached it to the plumbing vent in there. So the drains for the plumbing system that go out through the roof, they got creative and hooked the bath fan to that, which you're not supposed to do either. Actually, the way that is set up, water could possibly get into that flexible vent if it rained hard enough, and it could sag over time. There's a remember those drain vents that go through the roof actually go all the way down in through your plumbing system and out the sewer. So if it does get any moisture in it. So that was just a unique situation right there. But like I say, structure, insulation, those are all components that we're looking for up in the attic area. All right, so we'll flip to another one. All right, we will go to outside electrical here. Now, when we're looking at a house, as far as electrical, one, we're looking at the meter itself. We're also looking at like the wiring itself to make sure that there's no sheathing worn out. We're looking at the uh, when we're looking out this way, we're looking for clearance to make sure there's no trees rubbing in there as well. We're looking at the attachment that it has to the house. So when it comes back and it attaches to the house there. Now, when I zoom in right here, what you're going to see there, that gray bracket there at the top, that's what holds your electrical power to the house. So when we say the electric is actually pulling away from the house, this one's actually where you can see this piece is actually leaning. So that's the part that we're talking about when it says like it's pulling away from the house. And then it flips over to a weather head where the wires come straight down into the meter. Now, if that was to break loose, the way that those wires are set up, it would probably stop at that first bracket right there because it is facing that direction. Sometimes when the brackets are facing the other way, sometimes that whole wire can actually pull off the house if it's not on there very good. But like I say, we'll look at the wire itself just to make sure that the outer sheathing is fine, because if it's frayed or not, water will actually get into the meter. Same with that little black piece there at the top of the meter there. That's the seal at the top, so that you don't get any water in the meter as well. The other thing that we'll look at is going to be uh, the electrical tags that are going to be on there. Make sure that the electrical company is, if those are cut, somebody's done some work that they probably shouldn't have been doing. Then, of course, after that, we'll check down at the bottom there to see where if there's a grounding wire in there and a grounding rod. And that's basically what we'll look at on like the outside of the house. All right, so let me flip videos here now. We will flip to the electrical panel. All right, so when we're looking at the electrical panel, a lot of times you'll see what they call a double tap. Let's just say that. That's probably one of the more common things that you will see on an inspection report, is where they have double tapped the breakers, and that's where two wires go to a single breaker. Now, this particular panel here is made by Square D. Square D, the ones that have the yellow symbols on them like that, not one of the older ones. The newer ones like this are the only panel that I've seen that you can actually double tap a breaker. And the reason you can do that is where the wires come in on the side of uh, the little screws on the side there where the lugs are. They have slots to accept two wires. Now they do have to be the same size wire on there, but this will be the only panel that you can actually double tap a breaker on there because it's set up to actually accept two wires on those. So sometimes if you get an inspection report, uh, like our guys are trained to know that the Square D can accept that. Sometimes some of the newer guys may not know that, and they may write that up, and then the electrician comes out and says it's fine. But this is the brand that will allow that to happen on there. But we'll also look at like the neutral wiring in there as well, the grounding, bonding of the panel itself. We check like the main breakers and things like that, just to make sure the wire sizing and everything is correct on there as well. Oh, and the wire size, I forgot that too. Now, if you see here on, excuse me, on where the wires go into the screws there, You can see that all those wires are on the single breakers, no, not the double one at the bottom, but the single breakers there at the top. Uh, all those wires are on the left side of that screw or the top side of the screw. They have another lug on the bottom side of that screw there. That's what accepts the second wire there, where you can do a double tap basically. Um, and that would be acceptable on those. Other things that we look for, and usually we find these on, I would say, 1970s houses. A lot of aluminum wiring was used in the 1970s. So like there are some development areas that we've come across there where they do have aluminum wiring in there, solid aluminum wiring. Stranded aluminum wiring is fine, uh, but a lot of times on the solid aluminum wiring, they would have issues with expansion and contraction of the wires on there, and that's what causes issues where the wires will come loose and sometimes in outlets and things like that too, if they weren't rated to hold the solid aluminum wire. But like I say, the double breakers can have that stranded aluminum wire. That's fine. It's just the single solid ones that we had the issues with. And they're usually easy to call out on those two. Uh, Actually, this panel does have some. This panel actually does have some. Excuse me. The let's see, one, two, three, about fourth wire up. You'll see the aluminum ground wire right there. That one has that's the aluminum wire. You'll see all the copper wires that are in there, but there's like one, I think one in there that does have the aluminum wire. So that would be one of those areas that the electrician would have to take a look at just to make sure everything's all right, and they may have to do some adjustments there. All right, we'll flip to another video. All right, also, as we're going through, we're going to check for outlets. Now, this is a standard outlet tester that you can buy at the store. What we're looking for when we're going through and checking every outlet that we can access in the house is going to be for the two lights on the right side to be lit. If the two lights on the outside are lit, or on the right side are lit, that means it's wired correctly. If, like this particular one here, I've got one that is the left and the right one there, that means they hooked up the hot wire to the ground wire. So that one has issues, needs repaired and stuff like that. One of the most common ones that we run into quite a bit, especially on older houses, is going to be what they call reverse polarity. And that's where basically they put the wires on backwards on there. Now, in those circumstances, you'll still get power to those outlets. If there is an issue where it goes to throw the breaker, it's going to be thrown in a reverse direction, and it will actually blow a spark instead there. So it's a safety issue that we'll list in the report, but it's usually a very easy fix to get those fixed as well. The other things that you want to remember as far as like outlets go, of course, GFCIs have to be in a, it's not one of those things where it's grandfathered in. We'll always write it in a report. If it's not in areas like your kitchen sinks, your bathroom sinks, laundry areas outside, basements and like garage areas, anywhere where there's dampness or some moisture can come into play, we'll always put those in there just for safety purposes there. All right, let me see if I got one more. I got two more. All right, so as far as plumbing goes, one of the key things that we do is run a lot of water because we want to find leaks. Now, like in this particular one, we will run the water up to the top of the sink there. We want to make sure that the overflows work. Same thing with the bathtub areas. We fill up as much water as we can during these inspections. And let me spin around here on this one. But what we'll do is because we're filling the sink this high, when if you were to just run the water with the drain open, most likely you will not find a leak. I've had this happen on several houses where we find a leak and it's actually draining through the ceiling. I think it was, excuse me, it was on a bathtub. It was on a bathtub, and we fill the bathtub up like we were doing right there. And when we drain it, it puts more pressure on the line. So if there are any leaks, it will show up. So in a particular house that we had done, we filled up the tub, we drain it. It's actually leaking through the ceiling down below on the first floor. Uh, we put that in the report. Uh, items were fixed in this particular house. The buyer was smart. They decided to have us come out and verify the repairs that were supposed to have been done. And the company that was fixing this house said that there was no issue with the bathtub. So I'm like, okay, well, let's try it again. So we ran it again, water leaked through the ceiling again. So, and we did a video for that for them. Basically say, hey, fill up the tub and then drain it, and then you'll find your issue. Because they had the back sealed, you couldn't see the plumbing parts behind it. So they probably would have had to have cut something open in order to fix that correctly. But filling up the sinks like this, like I say, when we drain it, it puts more pressure on the lines so that if there is a leak, we're going to find it that day. Um, Otherwise, you won't see it if you're just running an open drain in those areas there. But yeah, they'll end up leaking right in those areas right there when they get the pressure on there. All right, I got one more as far as inspection stuff. All right, this one here, we're talking about structure on the house there. Now, we're always looking for cracks in the wall. And the biggest issue you have with cracks is going to be the horizontal crack. The horizontal crack, especially if it's midway in between the wall, is where you're going to see most of your issues from, because it's going to act like a hinge there. And we'll also check like the supports and stuff, which you'll see in this video here. The support underneath the beam there, it's actually split so far off the wall, I can actually stick my hand behind it right there. So that's one of the issues that we're going to be looking for when we're going through the basement area there as well. All right, we will flip back here. All right, so going through some of the tools that you may see an inspector use these days. It's a little bit more than a flashlight and a clipboard these days, and a screwdriver. Up there on the top left is a thermal imaging camera. Basically what that's going to do is it helps us detect if there is moisture leaks. Like say, so if when we're running the water, we don't get water leaking through the ceiling every time. That's just on rare occasions. Um, but if there is a leak, say in a toilet or a sink or a bathtub on the second floor there, using the thermal imaging will actually help us see the color differences. So what it does is it detects temperature differences. And so if there's a water or if it's a cold pocket, it shows up like in a purplish color for us. So then if we do find one of those areas, the tool that's right next to it with the little points on it is what we call a moisture meter. Now, the moisture meters we have two options on them. One, it has the points on it there where you take that cap off, you can actually probe something to see if it's wet in there. It also has a non-destructive, I would say, feature on it there, where the bottom of it will actually detect up into like about an inch into the material to see if there's any moisture, and it gives us a reading as far as if it's elevated or not. On there, basically, it has like a green and a red thing, but it also gives us the number of the moisture content it finds, so that we can tell if we take the thermal imager, we scan an area, we find an issue, we can back it up with the moisture meter to tell if it's an actual leak or if it's just a cold pocket that's in there. All right, the meter to the right there, that is gas leak detector. That's when we go and check the gas lines to see if there's any leaks into any of the joints or valves around the furnace, like water heaters and stuff like that. On the bottom there to the left, that right there is for checking for air quality with mold on there. So basically, we'll run samples. There's a little sample cassette on the top right there. And we'll just have the air get sucked through theirs, and we send those off to the lab and they analyze them. The component there to the right, that is a sewer scope camera that we use. Basically, when we have people that want us to check the main line in their house, we use that instrument where we can actually, and it depends on how we're doing it. Some of the older houses, if they got the big cast iron plugs in it, uh, and we don't want to break those off, we will actually, one, we can either go through the roof. If it's like a ranch house, that's usually easiest to do. Sometimes we do have to pull a toilet on there as well, and we bring wax rings and stuff like that to seal them back down. But the sewer camera, and when I update this class again, I'll probably put a sewer camera video in there. But basically, we're going to shove a camera down the drain line and see if there's any broken pipes or clogs or anything like that in there as well. All right, so we'll talk about the report, the inspection report. Always try to, if you have questions on it and try to understand, always call the inspector. Don't try to corner the inspector, especially if you're a listing agent and you're questioning things. Don't bring all that stuff up in front of the buyer. I had one last week where that issue happened, and it makes it a very bad situation, and it's easy for the buyer to say, "I'm done," and they will walk. So always, if you have questions, ask them later. Feel free to call the inspector. And if you're going to talk about repairs, talk about those after the inspector has left. All right, I always put this in here. I've done this in the other classes there. I always say, what does that say to you? You take a second if you can figure that one out. But I will give you a hint on this one. Basically, what it says is, "See Willie, there they go, 1,000 buses in a row. No Joe, them's trucks, some with cows, some with ducks." The reason I put that on there is some inspection reports are going to vary differently as far as how they are worded on there. Some inspectors may be more technical on those, where they list the compressor for the air conditioner or the A coil for the air conditioner on the unit. Some companies, like such as ourselves, will put, if there's an issue with the air conditioning unit, we'll say the outside part of the unit or the inside part of the unit, so everybody knows where we're going. Also, uh, we will also put in there issues like uh, what side of the house is it on. Some people will actually put directions of west, north, south, east, or west on those. We take a little bit more direct because some people don't have no idea unless the sun's out which way they're going. So we usually put like front, rear, left side of the house, right side of the house. Everything's taken from the front, basically. So it makes everybody so they're not looking on the wrong side of the house for something. Also, for inspection reports, an inspection report is going to have some features in it the state does require. It does require the inspector's signature on those. Also, it will have their license number on there as well when it expires on there. And then as you're going through an inspection report, and every company is going to be different on how they report those. I think some people are adding videos and stuff. We just try to get the print material to you as quickly as possible. But like on our particular inspection report, as you're going through, we will actually put little hammer icons next to those items that are deficient on there. Uh, Usually it'll have a picture with it as well, sometimes a diagram like you see there in that report. But we tried to categorize them basically to see so people would know what issues are going to be bad, what issues are maintenance items. So we actually list ours as maintenance, minor, or concern. Maintenance is like caulking, torn screens, stuff like that, paint. Minor issues would be something considered under $500 in estimated repairs or an upgrade to a system. Concerned items could be anything that's over $500 or an immediate safety issue. And we only use black and white ink or black ink, basically, on our inspection reports. Some inspection companies may highlight all those deficiencies in red. That seems to be a popular thing to do. We've felt like that can kind of scare people and not actually look at the content. They're looking at the color, and they're worried about that. So that's why we've left everything in black. And then also what we do is like on that lower right part of the picture you're seeing now, that's our summary page, where anything that had a little hammer icon next to it, it groups everything together there at the end. So it's a summary page, sort of like their to-do list is how we describe it to the people. And then they work their way through it, see what items are concerns and which are maintenance things and minor stuff that they don't have a big a concern about. And usually what we'll have is like 2 or 3 concern items. You know, when we go through the report at the end there, we tell them all of what the summary items are going to be and what are going to be their big concerns with the house as well. When will you receive the inspection report? Ours are going to be same day on there. Some people will have next day there as well. I've heard some people are 2 days out. We try to get it same day because if we're doing an inspection the next day, we don't want to have to think about what we looked at the day before. So we get those out next day. The latest you'll get it is like the morning after on there for ours. And everything is sent electronically as well. All right, so some other aggravations that you may run into. Always make sure your utilities are on, water, gas, electric on there. We can still do the inspection on the components itself, uh, as far as what we're looking at. But we will have disclaimers in there as far as like, hey, we couldn't test the drain lines in there because the water was off. Couldn't test the water pressure. Sometimes you can't test the furnace. I mean, we'll check all the other components, the structure, the roof, all the other components that are there. Make a comment, say on the water tank on there if there's some damage to it as well. But always try to make sure that the utilities are turned on. Sometimes you run into winterizations. Some companies won't touch that. We actually do. As long as the meter's in place, we can de-winterize a house and run everything like we need to on there as well. Some companies may not do that. So always keep those in mind. All right, going back to obstructions. We talked about that as far as like attic spaces and stuff like that. Having areas blocked off or sealed, sometimes the buyer will question those areas. You know, why did they block off the crawl space access with this big filing cabinet that's like the only thing left in the basement or something like that? Because it's odd that sometimes those things happen. And I'll show you some pictures here, especially with attics, like the picture there on the left. You can see right there, we can't get into that because obviously we're not going to move motorcycles out of the way to get into that attic access. Also, closet areas are notorious for people leaving their things on there as well. But like I say, we always send that out. Make sure your areas are accessible. Electrical panels. Sometimes people build walls around them, and you can't access the screws to take the cover off. So if you have an issue, you have to tear the wall apart to get to it. That does happen quite a bit on some of the older houses where they have that big lounge area in the basement there with the bar and everything, and they got a big nice wooden box built around the electrical panel, and you can't take the cover off. So that does happen as in there as well. But remember, those areas that can't be accessible, that goes back to the risk of the buyer on there if we can't access those areas. So like I say, preparing the property. These are some of the areas that you want to make sure that are accessible: your attics, your electrical panels, exterior closets on the outside of the house, the garage. Make sure you can get in through the gates or the yard. You can access the furnaces and the water heaters as well. Quick thing on access, lock boxes. If the house does have a super access, since they changed to the Yes MLS system, in our area. They did take the inspector's keys away. Uh, we do have a super access, but it has to be sent through a uh, one-time access code there. So we can actually get an access code sent to us by the listing agent to our personal cell phones, where we can open up the box there and get in, as long as everybody knows how to do that through their dashboard. Always make sure your combination codes are correct. Make sure lock boxes are secured. Oh, and if there's a lock box and you have a storm door on there, we've run into that before. People will lock the storm door and the lock box is right behind it. So always make sure that you have access to those lock boxes as well. And make sure that they're hooked to something permanent. I'm not sure a tree branch works real well. I'm sure those could be cut off. And I'm not sure how much these boxes cost, but I'm sure they're not cheap to have replaced if they do get stolen. Just quick thing on weather. Um, Snow can be an issue in the wintertime as far as checking roofs on there as well. We try to check the attics as best as we can to make sure there's no leakage and stuff like that. But if there's like a snow with ice in it and stuff like that, you can't really see the condition of the shingles on there. So it may require somebody to come back out and take a look at those. Heating and cooling systems. Some inspection companies may not test the air conditioner if it was below 65 degrees. A lot of them do that. We actually take ours down to 50 on there. So if it's 50 degrees or warmer, we'll check the air conditioning unit. Because if it gets too cold out there, in the lower 30s and stuff like that, you can actually damage the system running those. I've only run into heat running a furnace one time. It's like a older house that had um, it was vacant and it was like 100 degrees out that day, and the temperature was so hot in the house that the thermostat wouldn't go high enough to turn it on. So you may run into those issues too. If you do seller inspections, that's always beneficial to the seller there. So if there is issues that crop up, they can have those taken care of before the buyer's inspector has those done. You can get them repaired, get multiple quotes. You won't be in such of a hurry trying to get things fixed last second if you know what's going on with the house prior to a buyer coming in. All right. Will the inspector recommend whether or not to purchase a property? They should not. It's easier for me because I have 4 kids, because usually I say that, well, the house doesn't fit, and I make it a joke a little bit. I'm like, well, it's not. I got 4 kids, I wouldn't be able to fit this many people in the house, stuff like that. But I always explain it's like, look, here's the information that's going to be given to you. Uh, Go over it, and then talk with your agent and see where you go from there. And that's basically how we address those issues because they always ask, would you buy this house? So I do want to get to some videos here. We do have red flag issues. And we got about 8 minutes left. So let me flip over here to some more video. And let's see here. All right, I think we already hit structure a little bit. Nope, that was the same video. We already did that one. Oh, here's one. This is a septic dye test. Now, usually I tell people, I go, these are pretty much useless when we do these. Some banks do require them on there, so we do offer it. But if you see green, like bright green, sometimes they use red dye as well. If it's coming out in the yard already, that's bad, especially during the inspection, because you definitely have a problem with the septic tank. A lot of times we'll come back like a couple of days later just to see if anything did come out, because usually we don't see the dye. But if you got dye coming out that bad, that's usually a big issue right out of the gate, especially when we're only there for just a short period of time on there. Let me flip here. All right, this right here is a Federal Pacific panel. All right, so this is the one that everybody talks about, that has all the issues with it and everything like that. It's very noticeable by the red breakers on there. So the tips will be red on there. Of course, the panel cover will say Federal Pacific. And the key term is stab lock. Stab lock was the brand that had the issues with the panel. This particular panel here is what they call a split bus, uh, or split panel, because it has no main breaker on it. You're allowed up to 6 throws to shut everything down, but it won't have a main breaker. Like the breaker there, it's on the right, the second from the top there, controls the bottom part of there. But the big issue with the Federal Pacific was that the double breakers were not tripping on there, and then there was fire issues. There was never a recall on them, but that was the big issue. Most insurance companies aren't going to honor that. So if you do see those red breakers on there, that's the big tip off there. And usually it'll say Federal Pacific Stab Lock right on the cover right there. So if you see those, you're going to know there's going to be an issue already with that. It's going to be called out. A lot of times there's discoloration where the double breakers are, and that's where it was arcing because it wasn't tripping on there. And that's what was causing the virus. And that's what the issue is with Federal Pacific. All right, flip to another one here. All right, well, I'll show you another structure video. All right, so on this particular structure here, if you look at the bottom row of block right there, it's broken on there. So the wall has shifted enough where it has actually broken the bottom row of the block there. And then you'll also see on this wall here where it has the horizontal cracking, and there's another crack at the top there where it's shifted in. This wall was pretty bad on there. But you'll see where they tried to patch some of the cracks and they've re-cracked after that. And you can see where it's broke on there at the bottom. When it's broke at the bottom, that's where the major issue is going to come, because most likely they're going to have to replace the wall at that point there. All right, I got I think 2 or 3 more real quickly. All right, so sometimes when you come into an attic, this is what they call vermiculite. All right, so this is a granule insulation that they used in the past there. And what they've discovered is because where they were mining it, they ended up getting asbestos. They ran into an asbestos vein in the mines where these were being dug out. And that's when they found out there was an issue and stopped using it. It's a very good insulator, but very granule in there. We tell people just don't disturb it. If you disturb it, then it makes dust in the air, and that's where the issue comes into play. Or if you're doing renovations, I have vermiculite in my own house. We don't mess with it. So it's really not an issue, but you may have some people that do say they want it replaced. I have seen that in the past there too, because we do put a note in there about vermiculite and explain it and all that good stuff there. But this is basically what it looks like. It's very granule when you look at it. And if you do pick it up, it'll be dusty. Just don't breathe it in. All right, let's get to another one. I do want to hit this mold one right here. All right, so if you look at the floor joist above, right there, all that spotting in there, everybody looks at the basement and they're like, oh, everything's painted or nice and everything. Nobody looks up. So if you look up and you see all this spotting that is on the floor joist, that is a lot of fungal growth that is up right there. And just the cost to remediate those issues could be costly to your buyer there as well. I got 2 more. Of course, moisture issues is always a thing. It's always easy to spot when there's water on the floor. But a lot of times if you do have this where it's wet like this and then it dries, it does leave a stain on the floor. So anytime there's a stain on the floor, we do write that in there. We do defer it back to the seller just to make sure that there are no issues that they haven't disclosed on there. And one more. We're done. Yeah. We do check the furnaces as well when we're looking through them. Look, see if there's any rust or anything in those. on this particular one, we're looking for what they call a flame rollout uh, on there. So when the furnace starts up, you'll actually see, it should be here in a few seconds. Uh, you'll actually see the flame rollout right about now. Where it blows out like that, that will be an issue as well. All right. And we have hit the end. So, whoop, all right, where's my video? I'm not driving. There I am. All right. So I mean, I hope that briefly gets over. I'm going to be updating this class a little bit more and adding some more videos. But if you got any comments, did the videos help you at all on those? Uh, to help you see some of the things that we see out there. Uh, but as far as the class goes, we are done for today. I do want to just mention we do have another class. I think we sent the email out on there as well, as far as our next class, I believe, is in 2 weeks on there. We're going to be going into like inspection extras on there. We'll dive into a little bit of like the sewer scopes and mold testing and the radon testing and the other things that you may see during a home inspection that are additional services that are added on there. But other than that, I will send over the information over to our service provider. Uh, and then they will send out your certificates. They do, I believe they do send that out to the state as well, because everything's tied all together on that. But if you don't get your certificate within like 5 business days, just send an email in to me and then I'll get that resent out to you. All right. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. We do end on time. And I hope you enjoy your day. Just let me know if you have any questions and have a great day. We'll see you on the next one.